Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of Kera Dangerous Talk. You know, it's season 3, and we've already had some amazing guests for you. And tonight, the same thing is going to happen, baby. I have Dr. Cleo Manago ready to talk, and we're going to get it in good tonight. He's going to drop some jewels. You know how we do on this program. I want to just remind you right now to go ahead and hit that like button, like, comment during this episode, and make sure you share the content, guys. That keeps the algorithm on our side to keep pushing out this great Black content. All right, you know what it is. We got to hit that theme song. Hello, Dr. Cleo Manago. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. And just for the record, it's Cleo Manago.
My bad. I know I'm going to get some hits about that later.
Yeah.
Let me say it one more time for me.
Dr. Cleo Manago.
Manago. Okay, I'm sorry for the mispronunciation.
No problem.
Okay, doctor. So look, I want you to break down what you do for us, because I have here you're a behavior architect and you have some businesses that you run, and nobody can tell what you do better than you. So go ahead and give the people the spiel about what your mission is.
I certainly will, but I do have a question first.
Yes.
Am I away from backstage?
Are you away from backstage?
I'm no longer backstage because it says.
Oh no, you're with us.
Oh, okay, because it says I'm backstage. All right.
No.
I am a behavioral health analyst and cultural commentator, and I've been doing work around community mental health, empowerment, affirmation, what I call trance breaking. From my perspective, Black folks are in a trauma trance, and we've been deep in that trance unresolved for several generations, and we still up in it. And I'll break that down in terms of why I see it that way during our conversation. But my primary work these days is one thing I'm doing is teaching Black parents how to be intentional parents. I have a project called Black Leadership Through Parenting that we're working on, and we've used it a lot in Los Angeles. Now we're bringing it to the East Coast, and I'm doing work around doing bridge building across Black diversity, because one of the things that has us not as advanced as a collective as we could be is the artificial conflicts between us that become basically more destructive than racism.
I lost you there. I'm sorry. You froze, but I did. Froze. Yeah, you froze your screen, but it's okay.
Could you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Your video just froze. It's all good. So I kind of was going back and forth on where I wanted to start with you. There's so many interesting topics, but let's start here, because I know you've been feeling a certain way about the way that Black people are being portrayed in media in today's society. So let's kind of go ahead and jump into that full force, because I know I can speak on that, and I know you can definitely speak on that. So where do you kind of want to start with that and your feelings on the negativity of how we're being portrayed in media?
Okay, I'm not frozen, am I?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, I hate when that happens. Well, for example, I often do talks across the country to Black audiences, and I always ask them to articulate from your seat the name of a Black television show that's not a comedy, that reliably every week that you can see that features a Black love story, two Black people loving each other, and folks be working hard, and sometimes they can't take it, so they say Blackish, and I said that's not a comedy. And so my goal when I ask that question is to get us to become critically aware of the drought in Black love that's on the pop culture stage, and that Black children are sitting in front of this eating popcorn or whatever they're eating, and in too many cases they're not getting any insight on why this is the case, and it could feed into them, particularly these days with all this biracial promotion.
Mm-hmm.
It could feed into them questioning the validity of loving someone black, and of loving themselves. So I talk about that because that's an issue. That's a growing issue. Um, Netflix has, at least a few weeks ago, had 3 black actor featured shows. One was called Bruise, that starred Halle Berry.
Mm-hmm.
Called True Story, that starred Kevin Hart. And there's another one, a third one. Mr. King Richard.
Mm-hmm.
And real quickly, and this might be a spoiler alert for some of your folks, but in King Richard, there was only one redeeming black male, and that was Richard Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Without exception, the rest of the black males were gang members, killers, or got killed, or basically thugs. There was there was no redeeming value from any other male in that show, and I can't believe that when, at least when they were little, that Serena or Venus never felt had a crush on a little black boy. I mean, it must have happened, but you wouldn't be able to tell in this film. And then True Story started a comedian, Kevin Hart,
Mm-hmm.
who wound up killing folks, including his own corrupt black brother.
Mm-hmm.
And of course the hero or the savior in the film, or the focus of rational behavior, was a white dude who was this
Mm-hmm.
manager who was always being there for him and all that kind of stuff. The white savior metaphor is a horrific one for black people. And Halle Berry played a part where her mother was screwed all up, and they had a fight because when she was a baby, she watched a train be run on her.
Woo.
But now you got to remember, this is all fiction. Even the movie that was called True Story was
Mm-hmm.
fiction. But we get emotionally involved, particularly when it's a well-made film or a well-performed film. And all 3 of these films had good acting performances. So that means they were particularly seductive,
Mm-hmm.
particularly engaging, and as a result, particularly brainwashing to the black unconscious, feeding into anti-black notions and anti-black male notions.
You know, it's something very interesting to kind of go off of that. It's very interesting to me because I work for some of these places. You said prior in another interview that if you look at some of the top black names, especially at CNN, there's a particular pattern of the way that they choose those black faces that they want to put on TV. Do you know what I'm talking about, Doctor?
Of course I do. I'll preface my comment with this: there's no such thing as an accidental pattern. Those are contradictions in terms. Accidental pattern. If it's
Okay.
a pattern, it's not an accident. And there's only 3 black gentlemen on CNN who have their own show. One is Don Lemon. One is starts with a V.
Van Jones.
Van Jones. And
Mm-hmm.
there's this comedian. I forgot he's a tall brother with an afro who has.
I know who you talking about. He got a series where he goes
Yeah,
around different
yeah.
places.
And all 3 of those men have something in common, which I
Mm-hmm.
don't think is an accident. They all love them some white folks.
Yes.
And they all are in relationship with white folks exclusively, basically. And my analysis of that, and I know this is to be true now based on research that I've done, is that.
And wait, don't forget Robin Roberts, who's a lesbian, has a white partner. I just want to throw that out there. She's a different channel, but just to prove.
Well, since you bring it in same gender loving people, I'll just say that every well-known same gender loving person on television, both male and female, has a white partner. I'll
Yes.
go down the list: Don Lemon, RuPaul, Wanda Sykes, Lee Daniels, the transgender person. I forgot their name. Lee. I forgot their name. But
Mm-hmm.
Billy something from the show Pose. Billy, I forgot his whole name. Well,
Billy Porter.
Billy Porter.
Yeah.
All of them have white partners.
Yes.
And what a lot of us don't understand, when we see this mosaic of black faces, we feel like, okay, these are black men who have made it, or black women who have made it. They've made it. They're in the limelight. But no, they're chosen by 99.9% of the people in the media are chosen by white folks based on white criteria to be there. And they might look black because many of them genetically are black, but
Yes.
they are being used. Now, whether they know they're being used or not is not the point. Many people get excited when they get called by press and get excited when they get opportunity to be on CNN and be a fixture in the media. And so they get so egotistically caught up in that they have that opportunity that I think in many cases they don't even ponder about whether they're being used. And if they are deeply head over heel in love with white folks, they definitely are not going to critically analyze white decisions because they got white in-laws and white people they love very much and white people who they live to be in close proximity to. So people like that tend not to have a similar critical analysis or any at least verbal recognition about this absolute pattern because everybody black ain't with nobody white, or I should say more professionally, everyone who's African American does not choose a white partner.
I was fine with the word ain't.
Well, you're bilingual. Okay, I hear you.
Well, let me tell you something. I've been in the media business over 15 years, okay, working in behind the scenes in production. I just did a big interview on Hip Hop Uncensored, and they was asking me about big black on air talent. And I basically said these people who are on air, they have to really fight to get where they are. You know, it's a real battle. And even when they get where they are, it's a battle to stay there. I mean, not just white people, but black people are trying to get their position. And they wanted to know, was this particular person a coon? Because I have this no cooning shirt and my whole thing is an anti-coon. And I have to say, a lot of people, in my opinion, that are big faces, talking heads, as we like to call it, on TV, seem to be what we call safe Negroes. You know, and I also saw the pattern myself, and that's why when I heard you say it about the living and the others, it just seems like, and not just the same gender loving people, but it does seem like those people do get white mates who normally are doing well financially or have a great career or whatnot. But what's really the deeper issue there? Like you said, there's no coincidence. They must know that that's a way to help them keep their position. Do you think it has something to do with that?
Well, first of all, similar to Barack Obama and the person who I call Obama, who y'all call Kamala,
Okay.
these people are essentially chosen and predominantly voted into place or appointed into place in Kamala's or Obama's case by white folks.
Mm-hmm.
So they're enjoying themselves, being president, being vice president, having their own show on CNN, being a mainstream comedian or blah, 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 blah. They're having a good time fulfilling their dream. What they may not realize, and I have interviewed or been in the presence of enough of them to realize this, is that they're not there's an issue that's affecting black people across the board in this society, and that is institutionalized, unresolved black anti-Blackness.
Mm.
And we are all conditioned to be relatively anti-Black, and we live on a spectrum of very anti-Black to quasi-anti-Black. But anti-Blackness is a pathology that's deeply in the Black culture. And the reason I bring that up is because I believe that some of these people that we just mentioned suffer from a industrial strength level of a phenomena that's pretty epidemic in the Black community, which is anti-Blackness, which the opposite of anti-Blackness is really the opposite of anti-Black is pro-Black. But we see the opposite of anti-Black as pro-white.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, a lot of people who are caught up in the anti-Black spell or trance are more concerned about being anti-white and more critical of anything that looks anti-white than they are anti-Black. So that's the foundational issue, and I want to reiterate that a lot of what's happening is unconscious. It's not conscious, and there's a normalized sense of schizophrenia around being Black in the white supremacist society. For example,
wait, what did you call it?
What did I call what?
You said it's a what? You said did you say schizophrenia? What did you say?
There's a normalized anti-Black schizophrenia inside of Black culture, and that Black people live with.
Okay.
And one of the more high profile examples was Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson literally painted his skin white He said he had vitiligo, but vitiligo should have been spelled Vitlaie because it was a lie. When you dye your skin, you can produce the impact or the effects, I should say, of vitiligo because you are compromising your I can't talk tonight. I remember tonight. What's that stuff? Your skin is your what is it? Darn it, your pigment. Thank you. Back.
Pigment. Okay.
You are intentionally compromising your pigment, which can cause a self-induced vitiligo. And one of the things that Michael Jackson told his doctor was, please don't let nobody see my bleaching cream. Anyway, getting back to the issue that at hand in terms of him being on the high spectrum of anti-Blackness, this man went out and bought some white kids, really white kids, and dyed one of these babies' hair blonde because he couldn't find a blonde one, I guess. So, and it's dangerous to dye babies' hair anything. Yeah, he dyed one of the babies' hair blonde, but when he got maybe a few years after his children were alive, like maybe 4 or 5 years or something into it, he had some regret. So they had a black teacher, they had a black doctor. He was surrounded them by black people, but it was still a huge schism because they ain't his kids and they white. And he's quasi-black in terms of his actual heritage, but though he looked like he looked, but a lot of black people that I've met who've gotten older and kind of got revelations about the mistakes they made, they had done too many deep things to totally walk out of it. Like in this case, when he had white kids. Mm-hmm. My point is that's a high level, high profile example of the schizophrenia that results from internalized, unresolved anti-Blackness. And there's black people, everyday black folks who are not on TV. I mean, when black people get mad, one of the first things we think is the N-word. You N-word. Well, that's white supremacy's echo. That's where it came from. I was talking to a young man in Philadelphia 2 days ago, and while we were talking, he used that famous N-word, and I said, I said respectfully, not with an attitude, because that doesn't work. I stay respectful. I don't use that word. I'm offended by that word. I don't perpetuate white supremacist thinking in the black body. Mm-hmm. Then he went into this whole thing. No, it came from Negus, and it don't mean the same thing. And that's a very crazy explanation because that's from Ethiopia. It's part of some Sanskrit. Mm-hmm. And we're from West Africa. It ain't got nothing to do with us. Mm-hmm. And there's over 100 languages in West Africa alone, and none of them have any derivative of the N-word at all. Period. And you're going all the way to Ethiopia, to Negus. And then when I went to Ethiopia about 4 years ago, I asked them about Negus and King and told them about the African American association of that word with the N-word. And those people laughed so hard, it wasn't even funny.
Really?
They were like, what? I said, yeah, there's black people who are saying that Negus is the derivative, that the N-word is the derivative of the word Negus, and it means king, so they're really kings. But they laugh so hard.
Wow. That's funny that you said that because I actually saw you in a picture. I'm friends with Lunel, by the way. I like to call her friend. She's been on the show twice, but I don't know where you guys were going, but I noticed you had the same picture of Paul Mooney as she did. You guys were on a bus going somewhere. I'm only bringing this up because I love Paul Mooney for one, but you know how he used to say the N-word, but then he had a change of mind or change of heart about it. So I just wanted to ask to bring that into the conversation, but also ask, what were you guys doing on the bus? And then how did you feel about him changing the way he was using the N-word in his comedy, since you obviously knew him a little bit?
Well, a beloved friend of mine who I adore is Marsha Warfield. You remember her, right?
The name sounds familiar.
She used to be on a show called Night Court.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I do. I remember that.
Yes. And
was she the judge?
She was the bailiff, I think.
The bailiff, okay.
Yeah, but she was a predominant figure on that show.
Mm-hmm.
And more recently, she's on a few things, including a film with Linnell. But anyway, I asked when I heard about this black comedy event that was happening in New York. I asked her, could I be her date, or could she be my date, and could we go together? And we went together, and Paul and Linnell and all kinds of comedians was there. And I was surrounded by these crazy black folks. And the most popular picture with me in it, I'm dying laughing because they didn't have no dang sense. Because they're black comedians, and Linnell was a fool.
Right.
He was always a fool. So we were on our way to a black comedy reward ceremony. And regarding the N word and Paul Mooney, in short, I agreed with him. I mean, in terms of his change of heart, because the word is extremely destructive. I mean, I tell young people all the time who try to come with these excuses to use it. I always ask them, what's the benefit? And why are people who don't defile themselves and use words that came from white folks to defile them more successful than we are?
Mm.
How come there's no such thing as a song on the radio saying, I'm living my best life, I'm not going back and forth with those crackers? I'm living my best life, I'm not going back and forth with those wetbacks. I'm living my best life, I'm not going back and forth with those chinks. That song does not exist, and it never will exist. And even if some of them are dealing with internalized oppression, they still have enough of a cultural compass not to defile themselves and each other in public.
Mm-hmm.
Because they weren't enslaved for over almost 300 years and domesticated out of their right minds like we were. And unfortunately, in many cases, still are, because we have not worked in an intentional manner to resolve that. So when Paul Mooney made that decision, I was very excited because I remember when Richard Pryor, he's probably too young to know this, but Richard Pryor did the same thing. He went to Africa. He went to, I believe it was Nigeria or Kenya. And when he got back, while he was there, he was so moved by all the blackness and black airline flight attendants, all this stuff. He was so moved by the whole experience that when he came back, he said, "Don't say it. I'm not saying it anymore."
Mm-hmm.
But soon after that, a white man helped to bring a group called NWA into the limelight, and the word got kicked back into our consciousness.
That's amazing you brought up NWA because what's the movie with Ice Cube, Boys in the Hood? I heard someone tell me, and hopefully this is true, and it sounds true, that Ice Cube realizes that when he started traveling in his career, the negative impact on the black image that those movies had, even though we find them to be hood classics or whatnot, the way that the rest of the world viewed us, it kind of actually harmed our image, because now we got people in other places thinking that that's all we are. I mean, and I guess sometimes you hear stories like that and you think, how unfair is that? Why can't we have art and we be this multi-dimensional type of people? It seems like if it's not black people being, let's say, like the housewives on TV, or loving hip hop, fighting, throwing drinks, or rapping about shooting, killing, there's no lane for it, or it's not being produced, or they act like it won't sell.
Well, they're full of crap.
Right.
They're not concerned by what sells. And I'll give you an example again that you may be too young to remember. There used to be a show on nighttime television that was the most popular thing on nighttime television, and that no nighttime television has raised itself to that excitement, that level of excitement in this country, but that show, and that was the Arsenio Hall show. The original.
Okay, I remember that. Look, I'm not that young, but I'm not old either. So
okay, exactly. And his show was, I literally one day I was traveling across country, and I printed out a picture of all the night. I'm always doing this kind of what I call live research. I printed out a picture of all the nighttime host, and I walked around the airports that I was in as I waited for my flights and asked people, which one of these talk show hosts do you watch and who's in the most interesting to you? And they, almost all of them of all races picked Arsenio Hall, and didn't even know who the other people's names were. Like some of them even know what Conan O'Brien's name was. They knew who there was another person who they definitely, Johnny Carson, knew who Johnny Carson was. But anyway, the point is that show was selling, doing well, and making money, and they shut it down. They shut down anything that will take people out of the white supremacy trauma trance.
Yes.
And get us into thinking on our feet instead of being in the trance. So they remove things, and you mentioned these songs. Well, they are very brilliant conscious rappers out there on planet Earth, but they don't get no play.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get no, like this a young brother named Lupe Fiasco.
All right.
You've heard of him?
Of course.
Okay, well he's very talented, but he has had to make his own career because the system won't push him.
Yeah, I understand that the same as me. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you bring up a good point. I'm glad you brought up Lupe Fiasco, because I want to talk about, and we kind of skirted around it, white validation, because, you know, let's say the people that we talked about, the talking heads, they are validated by being a part of their black media, but their black media that's being pushed through white controlled media.
That's right.
And so I've had people tell me too, oh, you're talented, because sometimes I wonder why some of my coworkers, and I'll just be completely honest and vulnerable here. I used to wonder why they weren't more congratulatory towards me, or just, you know, with all the great guests I've been able to have on the show, with just doing this for a year and being on TV for, you know, after just doing this on my own for a few months. And a lot of people I thought were going to say, at least, that's great, Kara. You know, the older people that I knew who were on TV, who, you know, used to act like they cared about me. You know, some of them would just mute. I had my show ad in New York City, and some of those people who act like they like me so much, I heard nothing from them. Crickets, you know. And someone told me, Kara, they don't care because you haven't been validated. You haven't been validated by the right people. Yeah, you got a small black audience, but until white mainstream validates you, you're nobody to them.
Well, that's their conscious interpretation of it. But the unconscious is saying, I don't want to offend white folks.
Mm.
And I don't want to offend Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And who is the son of God, who must be white too.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been trained on an unconscious basis to believe that to actually and truly address racism in a holistic, effective way is sinful and sacrilegious. So part of what's going on is they may watch you, but they're not going to tell nobody. And this white person that they're trying not to offend is inside of our heads. Very recently, I saw some grown black folks talking about racism a little bit, and then mention the word white and whisper. You know, there's these white, and I'm like, y'all grown. Why y'all whispering? And ain't nobody white around. So who you whispering for? They're whispering for that white person in here.
Doctor, you ain't come to play. Let me tell you what I've noticed. These black people who are in that upper class of media, they're very cliquey. I tell people that all the time, the women and the men, for whatever, I'm not in that group. You know, they like me, but I'm just not in that group. But I have to tell you the short story. When I started working for ESPN, and I was there for 11 years, I had one of the biggest bosses in my department come to me. And I didn't come in there acting like Michael from Good Times. Now, I wasn't acting like that. I wasn't acting like Malcolm X. I mean, I wasn't even acting like Martin Luther King. I was just me, you know, just myself. And he closed the door and he told me, he looked me straight in my face, doctor. And he said, could you please just try not to be so militant? Can you try not to be so militant? What's your feelings on when you're just confident and you standing up in your own skin, and they have a problem? If you're that, they want to label you as militant. I know you talked about this before, so go ahead and break it down.
Well, what militant means, which we have to be clear about so we can stop doing this, it really means not accommodating white supremacy. Mm-hmm. That's what it means. And it's like, would you just status quo and act like the other white, black, white folks, and who live with us, love us, and in love with us, and impressed with us, and stop walking around in ways that brings attention to the idea of you loving yourself and caring about black people, and bringing into critical focus that Black people are important and should be powerful and autonomous. You stop that. And what's interesting about the calling you militant is that they're militant. They're white. They're white militants because they're on the militant side, meaning being a soldier for white supremacy and a soldier against you standing in your Black affirmation reality in perspective. They're militant. But white people have trained us to call our neighborhoods hoods and to call Black men thugs and to call Black people who care about Black people militant. When Black people care about Black people, should be called intelligent.
It is amazing because I was supposed to feel like I was in the wrong.
Well, it depends on who's looking. Of course, I don't think you're in the wrong at all. But a lot of us are brainwashed. That's why I told you much earlier in this conversation that anti-Blackness ain't no joke. Most of us are on the spectrum from unconscious, lightweights to industrial strength.
You know, I want to just remind people in this middle of this interview to like, comment, share, send it to a friend while we're here. Stay busy in the chat. That's the way we keep this algorithm on our side. Dr. Cleo, you said some amazing things, and it's some things I want to go back to you that you talked about. But yeah, that I just want to say that just has always bothered me. It's like they can smell it on you if you're Black and proud, just like I can smell a coon. It's just like they have a certain look. I mean, I can spy.
You gotta stop calling Black folks coons.
Why?
Because, okay. Well, finish your thought. I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to talk about that. Finish your thought.
No, that's it. I don't even. That's okay. It. Go ahead.
Okay. Black people are generational, deep victims of white supremacy terrorization. And as I said, Black people are on a spectrum of white supremacy, trauma trance, and internalized anti-Blackness. And then there's some who are fortunate enough to be outside of the anti-Black trauma trance, like myself. But most of us are in it, and we have to stop beating each other up for it and find ways to get people to critically consider being different through constructive interaction. Like I've always said, getting on somebody's case who is Black for hating themselves is like attacking somebody for limping after a car crash. Most people don't choose to be anti-Black. They are conditioned to be anti-Black and terrorized into this Black dismissal of self. And similar to this is the bottom line, similar to the N-word, coon came from the same place. Why would we use a word that came from the people that we are mad at Black folks for being like and use their word against Black people? That don't make no sense. And again, that's something nobody else would do. I was at a I do this all the time. I was speaking someplace, and I talked about how, and you already know about this, how when white people go to Walmart or to Bank of America or to Kinko's or to Apple, and they have bad service or their machine don't work properly, and that happens all the time. They don't go, these damn white folks, they can't do nothing right. I ain't never going back to no crackers ever again. They don't do that.
What? I know some people that do, but carry on.
Well, I tell you one thing, you could find anything under a huge microscope. What you ain't gonna find is them making a song about it and putting it on the radio.
Oh no, I got your point. I get what you're throwing out.
And of course, Black people who are already anti-Black, if you say something, do something wrong, and we go into anti-Black white supremacy mode because we don't say that at Safeway when the onions ain't right or whatever. We don't say that at other places in terms of making a decision. No, I'm not going there no more. We keep going back. And it's a similar scenario to somebody who's a victim of a domestic violence relationship. They keep on getting beat up, but they go right on back because they have been successfully pimped into feeling like they need that whooping. They need that person. And we think we need the word coon. We think we need the N-word, and we think we need white folks. And we don't need none of it.
Well, all these words are white folks' words, doctor. Where am I? To me, they have become enemies. I have an anti-cooning shirt that I sell, and it's still available on keradangeroustalk.com under merch. I don't spell out the word coon. We have a raccoon mascot. True story. Look. Look. Not only do I have to deal with white supremacy, I have to deal with these raccoons, and it's an infestation, and it's just a bad situation, Doc.
Look, now I'm not from planet Mars. I'm from the same planet as you, so I know what you're talking about. But I have strategically, and not in every case, I don't act like I got this and it always works, but I have strategically taught a lot of Black people, talked them out of the anti-Black white supremacy trance.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways that I was able to do it was to be compassionate and not re-traumatize them. Black people keep on re-traumatizing Black people. And that is not going to have a result that's transformative, and that's going to take them to another consideration. They look at that as, that's why I can't be bothered with those N words.
You know what, Doc? I do understand where you're coming from, and I do have compassion. I'm very empathetic, but I'm very aware of enemies on both sides. And perhaps in the future, I may consider a new word, but like someone always tells me, it's like you can't be too anti-Black, because at some point you got to buy the white man something, because we just don't own enough stuff. So currently I'm gonna have to use these white men words and still use the word coon. I'm sorry, Doc, to let you down on that level, but it's got to be anti-coon over here.
You got to get rid of them t-shirts. You got to sell them. But
right now on the Kera Dangerous Talk website, under merch is the anti-cooning shirt. So if you haven't bought you one, buy you one for Christmas.
But I'll just reiterate that we don't need them words. We don't need them.
Look, and someone just wrote, it is sad that Blacks who were once oppressed get a promotion or a higher position and then starts to become the oppressor. I mean, I just had this situation happen to me, which I can't talk about, but it's unfortunate, you know, when you get in a situation and you get a Black boss, you thinking maybe this will be better, and then it turns out to be worse, because now they have to do what they think white daddy think they should do, and a lot of times the Black bosses come down harder on the Black employees. This has been my experience, and those people who are in those positions are those raccoons that I do not like, and then I have to go to stomping around because I got to get rid of it. So, you know, that's just my experience.
Like I said earlier, I'm not from Mars. I'm from the United States of America, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And I've been through it to the point of very heartbreaking levels in my life. So I know. I know about, and they're going across my mind in terms of flashbacks. I know about having a Black boss who is abusive, who is over punitive, and who's very mean and disrespectful because I'm Black. Oh, I know all about it, but I also know why it occurs. And I also know that anti-Blackness in Black people is not a volunteer thing. I'll give you an example of what I'm saying. There's this Black anchorman or reporter, that's a good word for him, that's always on MSNBC. His name is Capehart, Jonathan Capehart. And one time, Jonathan Capehart in public, like it wasn't crazy, talked about how a white friend of his sent him a Kwanzaa card for the holidays and how offended he was. He said, "How dare he associate me with that? Why would he send me something that represents a fake artificial holiday?" And now that's a sign of being sick, because ain't no Santa Claus. It's artificial. Ain't no reindeers jumping over nothing. It's artificial. And this Christmas is a completely made up phenomenon, and there's no Easter bunnies with no eggs. So the whole thing is fiction and made up. But he implied that Christmas was real and Kwanzaa was fake, and he was offended that his white friend would associate him with such fake nonsense. Now, he said that in public, so he don't realize how idiotic and how ridiculous and self-hating and hypocritical that is. Because Christmas, Christmas trees. I mean, the whole thing is based on mythology, symbology, and something somebody made up. No more, no less than Kwanzaa, but at least Kwanzaa has specific principles in it to guide Black people toward constructive behavior. Christmas guides Black people toward buying stuff from people who don't even celebrate Christmas, and that's Jews. They're making all this money on Christmas, and they don't even celebrate it.
Yep, that was the devil's way to keep his hands in it, to make it to be something it's not, to add confusion, to make it about a bunny, to make it about a tree, when it's about so much more. I want to ask the audience question here because I try to let them be a part of this as well. Brian is asking, Dr. Cleo, do you believe that racism is a public health crisis?
Absolutely. It's a very old, deep, chronic, profoundly destructive public health crisis. Yes, I was one of the first people to articulate that line back in the late 80s. But people looked at me like I was crazy and racist and radical and militant and didn't want to consider what I was saying. They considered it extreme.
Okay, we have another question here by Andrea. Doctor, what's your thoughts on Black ADOS and declining fertility, the push for donor eggs and fibroids? I know that's a lie.
Donor fertility among Black folks?
Decline in fertility.
The decline in fertility among Black folks?
Yes. And ADOS, and it's a bunch of stuff in there.
Okay. This is a bunch of stuff. Okay. I think ADOS is well intended, but it's divisive. It's historically inept, and they have tunnel vision, and they remind me of Jehovah's Witnesses in that they get mad at you or reactionary to you because they be trying to recruit you, and when they can't, they act crazy. I hope you ain't know Jehovah's Witnesses. I hope I didn't offend you. But anyway, so now when it comes to the fertility thing, that really bothers me to talk about because I never have time in a one-shot conversation to break down the importance of Black people learning to eat right, learning to live a healthier life, and learning to be intentional parents and guardians of other people, to teach us to stop eating garbage and chemicals and fast food and all this stuff that's leading to Black people having some of the strangest bodies I've seen in my life compared to when I was young, and having fertility challenges. It's because of what we're eating. And and white people have always, in comparison, had fertility challenges that we didn't have. We for the most part, while we've been in the United States of America, have been very productive reproducers. But there are food deserts and dense fast food places, and a lot of depression in our community is leading to people using those same foods for comfort and distraction, which is why we have a major obesity problem in our community and diabetes problem. So yeah, I'm concerned about that. But I will say that it's all fixable. As a matter of fact, everything that Black people are going through is completely preventable and fixable, but not without us changing our behavior and our point of view and our mindset.
Thank you so much for answering that question. Thank you for the question, audience. Just a great breakdown of everything we've been going over here. So I kind of want to ask you a two-part question here, and I have it written down somewhere. Let me just try to find this. It seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I got to ask you this in a two-part way because I don't want you to kind of answer it with using my question, but you seem to get a little agitated now, and maybe that's too strong of a word when asked about your sexuality. And the reason I want to bring it up because I know that you coined the term Samegenderloving, and I have a problem with the fact that sexuality has become a greeting card. And I feel like sexuality is probably the most boringest thing about a person that I want to know about. You know, I just want to meet the person and get to know them and their spirit. But do you think I'm right in kind of assessing the fact that you seem to kind of want to, I see in some of your interviews, that's the first thing people want to come at with you. And I didn't want to come at you with that first, the whole LGBTQ conversation, which I do think is important. But I just kind of wanted to, you know, talk about some other things first. But let me get your thoughts on kind of what I just said there.
But first of all, I really appreciate you taking that approach, because what bothers me sometimes, and I don't know if I come off, or unfortunately I do, if I do come off with those words that you said in terms of irritated or whatever, my life, my interest, and my activity that my life is centered around in terms of Black healing, transformation, unlearning internalized white supremacy, and getting, I don't know, trauma trance are my focus, my professional, spiritual, organic life focus. And it's way bigger and more relevant than that. And when I send my bio out to people, I don't even mention that. Still, when I have not mentioned that, people start off with that. And what people may or may not know is that there's a Wikipedia page that I haven't seen in years, but I keep hearing about me. And what they don't know is that in the, God, I think it was the late 90s or sometime when Wikipedia was relatively new, I spoke at Metropolitan College in Denver, Colorado. And the young people were so moved by my conversation that they went and made a I didn't have a Wikipedia page yet. And they went and made one. And it was beautiful. And it was full of information about me that went way beyond this SGL stuff, that talked about my work, my research, the Black affirmation work that I do, the critical thinking and culture affirmation model that I developed that's been assessed by very formal evaluators who have said it's efficacious and effective, and all kinds of stuff that I'm about. And they had it all there, including some pictures. Somebody took that bad boy down.
Wow.
And what's left is this minimizing, reductive SGL stuff, which implies that I'm living for SGL, and I'm not. I can talk about it. It's important to me in terms of looking at same-gender loving people, homosexual and bisexual people through a lens that's not LGBTQ, because LGBTQ is an actively white supremacist and racist political paradigm. Actively, not passively. And the attacks on David Chappelle recently, and there's all kinds of other attacks that they've done, and they have Black followers behind them who are mad at Black people, who have anti-Black issues, who buy into it. But the point is that that's not what I'm primarily about. So it bothers me sometimes when that's the first thing people talk about. But I want to be clear. I'm not trying to disassociate myself from my sexuality or SGL. But like you kind of said earlier in your previous remarks, that is not my focal point, and it's not what I'm trying to talk about. I will and I can, but it's not my priority.
So let's talk about it. No, just
no, but you know you can, particularly since you
look.
You said let's talk about. We can talk about it if you want to, but Black healing and unlearning internalized anti-Blackness and white supremacy mythology are my priorities. But you can ask me anything you want to ask, including about that.
Well, look, I feel so embarrassed that I called, like I slaughtered your last name in the beginning of this interview. I guess I had mangoes on my mind. I apologize just to say that again, because I'm going to keep this episode up. I'm not going to edit it. And I just want to tell the people who are going to criticize me for slaughtering his name. Give me a break, okay? It was just my birthday. Let me live. Okay. Dr. Cleo,
you are hilarious. I want you to know that, but go on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I hope you know I'm staying in touch with you after this. I really like you a lot.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to call you. I just want to say, I normally on this show, I do what I call give people their flowers. And for some reason, I've started season 3 and I have not done it. It's supposed to be in the beginning of the show. But let me just give you one real quick. I just normally say, sit back and relax and let me give you your flowers, okay? And you're supposed to say, okay, thank you. Go ahead. All right.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, look. I have to say, I met you at Doctor's Boy's convention, okay? And you were just sitting in the chair. I saw you up there speaking, and I rushed over like how I do, take advantage of seeing the person I just saw speak. while you had nobody around you, and we met and we laughed just immediately. I loved your energy. When I did research about you, and I knew I've seen you different places, but I have to say I really like you because let me say something. And I'm gonna bring up your sexuality. You're a same gender loving person, but I like the way that you come at it because you're leaving compassion in there, but you're not afraid to say what certain people in that community have are thinking about that's not that they kind of should do more critical thinking on. Let me put it that way. I don't want to say their thinking is wrong, but you kind of go at, hey, let's look at things this way. Let's apply love here. Let's educate. And you want to remind people that, even though Black men could be same gender loving, that they're still men and they still need respect. And I just think that with the issue of Black people and how they deal with their homosexual children or whatever people want to call it, we have to, and I think this was said at the convention also, the All Black Convention, we have to stop kicking our gay children out of the home. It's destructive. I know personally from talking with a lot of same gender loving Black men that a lot of times they find themselves homeless or they try to make it out on their own. And a lot of times they have to be under the care of an older man, maybe, and maybe be given sexual favors or whatnot. I mean, stories can be different and varied. But my whole point is that stop taking your children and sending them out the house. We understand there's a lot of interwoven issues in this with the buck breaking. And, a lot of us are very religious and conservative. But I think God would he still want us to love each other. And just like the old Southern saying goes, you get more flies with honey, not with vinegar. And even though you may not agree, and I know some people, when they don't agree, they say it's a lifestyle. Well, even when you don't agree, you still need to love your child and stay compassionate and empathetic, because that's the only way they're going to be saved. When we start talking about suicide rates and depression among gay youth and even older people who identify as same gender loving, we need to bring compassion back even to things that we don't understand, because like Dr. Boy's whole slogan, and it's a slogan for most people who really have their heart in the right place when it comes to the Black media, is we are all, after God's children, we are all Black first. But I'm gonna let you have the floor now. But I just want to tell you that I like what you're doing, brother. I know it hasn't been easy for you, and because I know it has to hurt. Maybe not now because you're older now, but when you first started or whatever, I know you had those moments where you probably just doubted things. And maybe I'm wrong, but I just want to say thank you for the education that you give people, because I'm sure without a doubt that you've helped people, you saved lives, and you save people's families by the work that you do at your center. So thank you, brother. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, sister, for the affirmation. It's very sincerely, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Um, I think, kind of inspired by what you just said, that Black people need to understand. I mean, there's an old saying that if you don't educate your children, somebody else will.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of Black people being forgetful, complacent, or otherwise occupied regarding the importance of being the initial guiders of their Black children, a lot of our Black children are guided by whiteness. If they turn the television on without a critical analysis or an invitation to have critical analysis by their parents, they're in a ambush, a white anti-Black, white supremacist psychological ambush while watching television, because it's full of anti-Blackness. And they've turned up the ante on it with all this difficulty that you can find even in commercials of two Black people loving each other, even with children. I mean, it occurs, but it is very, very rare. But getting back to same gender loving people, what Black people need to understand is that one of the reasons why people like Don Lemon exist, the guy from Pose, whose name you said earlier, whose name I keep on forgetting, Billy something.
Oh, Billy Porter.
Billy Porter exists and run the white folks for sanctuary around their sexuality, is because the Black community has not actively created an invitation for them to love themselves in a Black community context.
Mm-hmm.
So to have some level of some type of affinity or affirmation that's explicit, some of them run to white folks for sanctuary. And they already have anti-black impulses because that's what the United States of America puts in black people. So when you have anti-black conditioning by being black in this society, and then you can't find black people on a macro or meaningful level that affirm you explicitly as you are, people go run to white folks. And that is not a simple thing. When they run to white folks, they wind up becoming anti-black and part of the war against black people. So we have to at least create space for people to embrace themselves and not feed into anti-blackness by dismissing the existence of same-gender-loving people.
Mm-hmm.
And I also understand, because I've studied it and talked about it for years, that black people are concerned, particularly these days, about the condition of black manhood because of all the feminine men and the transgendered and the white men literally asking white men to blank them. I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
blank because I don't want to cuss in your show.
Thank you.
And they're literally doing things and showing up in ways that got black people anxious. And instead of articulating, look, I'm concerned that you're doing that because of what has happened to black men, including the so-called buck breaking thing, and that you turned out like that because of trauma. And I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about the apparent and rising lack of black men as options. And here you come with it looking for another man or in a dress.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned justifiably about the attacks on black men, the absence of black men, and this homosexual stuff feeds into my anxiety about the compromise of black men. And that's a justifiable. It might not be a completely accurate perspective of what's going on, but it's a justifiable position and perspective that needs to be rationally engaged. And another reason among many that I don't do LGBTQXYZ is because they don't create space for conversations that are contextually black.
Mm-hmm.
Like if a black person says something that's critical of homosexuality, they can't wait to follow white people's example, go, you're homophobic, instead of asking them, well, why do you feel that way? What's going on? But unfortunately, a lot of us don't have the self-esteem, the self-love, courage, and language or belief in black people or respect for black people to have that conversation like that. And we're also willing on both sides unconsciously to be dismissive and write off black folks. Like when the baby, as he's called, or I call him Jonathan Kirk because that's his real name, said
Mm-hmm.
what he said, and he started being canceled by all kinds of folks, particularly white folks. I didn't agree with that. Just like I didn't agree with what they said about David Chappelle. My perspective was not that I agree with everything they said, but these are black men who have a platform. We should ask them, why did you say that? What's going on? Jonathan Kirk, or so-called the baby, why in the middle of a rap concert when Dick's in the parking lot was not the conversation, was not the topic, that you started talking about that? Why?
Well, I just saw a post. Well, as soon as Elton John complained about it in Madonna, they were ready to cancel him.
Yeah, and if we had any, and I'm talking to same-gender-loving people now as well, if we had any strong levels of self-respect, we would not let no white folks, we would not request that a white person cancel a black person. We would bring that brother or sister to the side and go, what's going on? Let's talk about this. Oh, and that's what, and I mean this real quick because this always gets forgotten. One of the things that causes reaction, particularly among men, to homosexuality is rape. They're rape. Some of them have been molested. And there's not a place in our community that, in many cases, where they feel safe to talk about that because they don't want to be called faggots. So they wind up living with it and then becoming older people who are resentful and reactionary and acting all out or confused about their own sexuality, just in case they are a same-gender-loving person as well. And there's these battles that happen because the Black community is not creating enough intentional space for Black healing and safe dialogue across differences. And we got
I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask that because so many people will always bring up, if somebody says they're gay and they're Black or just gay in general, they'll say, well, I wonder were they sexually abused, because it seems like, I think even Dr. Umar, and I don't want to quote wrong, but I think he even said if you look at the numbers, most people who are saying gender loving have been sexually abused. What would you say to that?
Well, you brought up Umar, not me. So first I'm going to say that. Secondly, I'm going to say that
oh man,
I have done what I call living surveys with lots of groups, and over the past 30 years, and I've run into heterosexual men who have been abused, who are heterosexual, and based on the circumstance in which we meet and talk, they can talk about it or they can't talk about it. But there are men. First of all, rape is a problem, and sexual abuse is a problem, and child molestation is a problem among girls and among boys. If everybody who was sexually molested was a homosexual, then most people would be one. If most women if we count women in terms of how many of them have to deal with some kind of sexual assault from somebody, including particularly men, but sometimes women too. If everybody raised their hand who was sexually assaulted, and people like Umar's theories were true, it'd be over half the population would be homosexual, and that's not true. And then there's people who say stuff like, well, they didn't have no daddy. I know a number of same-gender loving Black men who have great relationships with their father, who have a mother and father that they both know and have a great relationship with, who are same-gender loving people. So one of the side effects of us not having rational and more consistent or frequent dialogue about this issue is that folks like Umar can say crazy stuff, and because it's not a normal part of the conversation in my community, and he says it strong in his manhood, what I call man drag. There's female drag and there's man drag, and I think he wears man drag. But these brothers in their man drag, hardcore, hyper outfit, hyper presentations talk about homosexual this, homosexual that. Look, I'm not saying no names, and I'm not necessarily talking about Umar, but some of the most loud anti-homosexual people are running home to a dude. And one of the more high-level examples of this was Eddie Long.
Right.
Eddie Long used to march down Peachtree Avenue with no homosexuality signs. Nobody asked him nothing. Nobody initiated the conversation. He was the one who brought it in there, and lo and behold, right after each march, he was running home to a dude that he was molesting.
Now that's the truth.
So be careful and vet loudmouth brothers who every time they open their mouth, every road goes back to a homosexuality critique. You talk about toast and jelly and peanut butter and ice cream. Well, them homosexuals. I mean, they find a way to go back to that talk. Look at them sideways, because there's something going on. They could have been raped or molested, or they're struggling with their own sexuality, or both.
Now, what about the people, Doc, and we all know them, that go, oh, that wasn't in Africa. They was like, if it was one or two people. It was from Rome. That's where it started. The white men sleeping with little boys, and we just emulate everything that they do. What's your opinion on, and what's your response to, because I know you heard that's just gay conversation 101 or same gender loving conversation 101.
Well, I think it's more gay. But anyway.
Okay, gay. Okay. You is crazy.
The point I want to make is that when people say that kind of stuff to me, like I said, one of my strategies is to stay calm. I don't get pushed out of shape and, neck going and all of that. I stay very calm and I go, okay, could you be specific? When did the Romans go to West Africa and make everybody a homosexual? When? What are you talking about? Then they'll say something like, well, Greece and Rome are the beds of homosexuality. And they did this and that and the other. And I go, okay, have you been to Greece? I have. Have you been to Rome? I have. The mass majority of people in Greece and Rome are heterosexual. Most of the folks running around on the streets and every place else, they have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of heterosexuals in Greece and Rome and Italy.
What you said? They say, well, we're talking about back in the day. We're not talking about right now.
Right, but what I know exactly what you mean. But what I'm saying, because I believe in context, is that if homosexuality is the bed of if Rome and Greece are the bed of homosexuality, then Rome and Greek still should be rampant with it. If that's really from back in the day, based on what these people are saying. So my point is that, first of all, before I start asking them logical questions like, could you be specific, which they almost never can, I talk about the people from ancient Africa who are same gender loving, who were buried together in Kemet in the 5th dynasty. And I talk about gender nuance with people like Hatshepsut and Akhenaten. And I talk about the variables of humanity that come out of Africa that I know for a fact. I talk about Kabaka Mwanga, who you may or may not have heard of, but Kabaka spelled Kabaka, Mwanga spelled Mwanga, who was the last pre-colonial emperor of what used to be called Buganda, which is now called Uganda by white folks, who was a bisexual king of that area. And the reason, one of the angles that the colonists took to take him down was his sexuality. So,
yes, that's still used today to take people down.
Yeah, so they don't know what to talk about. And like I said, and I reiterated, somebody who, with all the topics on planet Earth to talk about, and there are gazillions of them, who have an obsession with homosexuality and masculinity, they're personally struggling, and they're in some kind of perpetual compensatory drag or hypermale drag to compensate from what they're personally struggling with. Because most of what we think of in this society as a strong man is really a terrified defensive person who's trying to not look terrified. So they walk hard and yo sup, and playing with their chin and walking all hard. That's all an act. I call it man drag.
I understand your point of view there, but I know that you have also said too that you understand the effects from buck breaking, but if you say that homosexuality was in Africa in the early beginnings, then how do you feel about the whole buck breaking thing when it deals with how maybe some Black men could have become effeminized and homosexual because of that, the generational traumas and all that, all mixed in together to make people a certain way?
Well, first of all, see, these people don't come in my face talking this craziness. I'm not one of these fans who's in desperate need for a quote unquote real man to appear and for me to get romantically excited about, because they do what I call man drag real well, and I'm looking for a man and he's in man drag and oh my God, is he wonderful. I'm not one of those people, and I'm an insecure man who needs to see a strong Black man, so oh my God, Umar, etc., they're just so great. I'm not, that don't work on me. So when they come to me saying stuff like that, I'll ask them again, when you say buck breaking, what are you talking about? And I've studied slavery in depth all over the Caribbean, all over the continent, and the United States of America, and went to the grounds that people were on and studied the whole thing very closely. And I asked them, what are you talking about? Now, one of the myths that's completely untrue is that, and some of them say this, is that the white master had homosexual buck breaking camps that they took Black men to buck break them and to rape them. That's the most insane, crazy. That's about as true as Mickey Mouse and the Three Bears. It's not true. Now, buck breaking did occur, but what people don't understand is that homosexuality up until the mid 60s to the late 60s in the United States of America was actively frowned upon and discriminated against and illegal in this country. That's why the white gay community built itself, was to fight against that tyranny of going to jail, getting beat up, being murdered, being killed in the military, all the stuff that homosexuals were going through. They fought against that with the white gay movement. So the farther back you go, the more ragingly anti-homosexual, just like the more ragingly anti-women and misogynist and sexist this society is. If a white man did anything publicly that represented homosexuality, he would have been in jail or killed. So that, among other reasons, made it almost impossible to create a homosexual buck-breaking plantation. But what did occur, which is different than what these hyper-masculine fiction tellers tale is that yes, indeed, black men were buck broken and were murdered and beat down and forced into submission. All that's true. But again, if everybody was homosexual because of this, most black men would be homosexual because most black men back then and even now experience castration levels of trauma. But most black men are not necessarily homosexual. So those are just freakish exaggerations by somebody with a personal issue.
Well, I want to make sure I ask you this, and are you good with the time? Because I went a little bit over an hour. I'm just gonna go a few minutes here. Ask you another question.
I can do a few more minutes.
Okay. I just want to make clear of how do you feel, why you don't say LGBTQ, so that my audience can hear the reasons that you did term the word same gender love and the reasons for that.
I'm glad you asked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna try to be brief and simple here. First of all, my agenda is the affirmation of black people. My agenda is the triggering of critical thinking, culture affirmation, self-love and respect, and the reversal of internalized white supremacy and the pathological impact of it on the black psyche and behavior. That's what I live for. The L in LGBT stands for lesbian, which came from the island of Lesbos outside of Greece. That's Europe. The word gay came out of the subculture of France, where they call the homosexuals in the artistic culture a part of gay Paris. So, and then there's this alphabet called the lambda that is symbolic on a whole lot of gay stuff because that's a Greek alphabet. So that's another European ethos affirmation of the construction of what's called gay. Then now you got the word queer, which I'm sure you've heard. Well, the word queer is from British. It's a British slang term. So the whole LGBT ethos and construction comes out of the affirmation of Europe. You may have seen the pink triangle that they peddle as part of what they do. Well, the pink triangle comes from Germany, from when the Hitler was killing homosexuals in the gas chambers, and everybody had their own triangle color, and homosexuals got pink. Now, that's an important history to know about, but it ain't my history. I have a history. Right. I have a history too, and I have a very rich, profound history in this regard. That's way, way, way older than Europe. That affirms people that are black, like myself. And I rather do things that affirm black people because I know the power of loving ourselves in our own image. And people who are black, who are wallowing in or going to LGBTQ for sanctuary, are going to whiteness for sanctuary. And that's like going to a rapist to be protected. It just don't make any sense.
Don't make any sense. Last question, because I know it's some parents out here that may need to hear this. How do black parents who are particularly conservative deal with children now who may say that they're trans or lesbian or same gender loving or bisexual, or any of those things? What's the best way? I know that may take a lot of time, but just summarize for me. What's the best way to deal with that in order to, keep that relationship still one that is productive?
Well, let's be realistic first. There've been people among black people who've tried to defy and interrupt homosexuality or same-gender loving people for at least the last 100 years. Has it worked? No. We ain't never seen more brothers in makeup before and more black people in the street talking about they're queer and lesbian and gay and etc. And the whole spectrum. So none of that resistance has helped. Matter of fact, all of that resistance from black parents or judgment has created traumatized children who suffer some kind of way, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's disassociation from family, whether it's living and being addicted to white folks, whether it's being highly ambitious in terms of their job, but personally miserable because they got that job to make up for being a faggot or an N-word, and they're not in synthesis with who they are. So no matter what it looks like, they're struggling. Well, the best thing a black parent can do, among other things, is to love their child and create space for their child to engage them and be completely honest with them regarding who they think they are and what they're dealing with, and to always invite them to talk about how they feel about anything. For example, this is relevant in terms of how black parents are trained to make black children more ambitious than sane. And what I mean by that is I was traveling across country doing some speaking engagements at some Black mental health conferences, and Dylan Roof had just got finished shooting 12 people and murdering 9. You know about that.
Yes.
And I spoke at a large conference in the Midwest that had almost 1,000 mental health professionals in the audience who were predominantly Black, and many of them, because it was a weekend conference, brought their children. So I had been speaking for a while because I was a guest primary speaker, and I had a exercise that I was going to do, and I asked the Black parents. I said, "Can I ask your children a question?" I said, "I don't want to ask your children or engage your children without your permission. I promise you that it will be appropriate, and if you say no, then I'll discontinue." And they trusted me at that point, so they said, "Okay, go for it." I asked the children. I said, "Do any of you know who Dylan Roof is?" And the kids who were like maybe 4 and up, and of course kids who were like 16, 17 were real clear, but many of the kids who were like 4 and up knew who he was because they watched the news, they watched TV, they could hear. And I said to the parents, I said, "You can't be dishonest because your child is sitting right there." I said to the parents, "How many of you actively engaged your child and invited them into a conversation about how they must feel about that Dylan Roof incident?" Mm-hmm. How many of you were actively concerned about maybe it affected them or how it affected them or traumatized them, and as a result of that consideration, sit them down and say, "Baby, that situation is pretty bad. What do you think about that?" And the majority of the parents said, I didn't say anything. These were mental health professionals, by the way. They said, I didn't think to do that. And some of the little boys started crying. So the reason I bring that up is because that was a living example of the fact that our children see, hear, and recognize everything. And if we don't actively engage them and love them in an anti-Black society or an anti-Black television set and create a challenge or contradiction to the implications of anti-Blackness in the culture, we're setting them up to be like Don Lemon, etc., or some other manifestation of internalized white supremacy that we might think is good because Don Lemon is on TV every night. But the brother can't touch another Black man with a 10-foot pole. That's not a self-love story from my perspective. But getting to the SGL tip, it's important that, first of all, I got to reiterate, love your child. Love your child, attend to your child, treat your child like a future adult instead of just a baby, and prepare them to be self-contained adult human beings by creating space for them to actually engage you and make you who they feel like they can be comfortable to talk to about anything. Now, if they're hearing you say in passing or at the church or wherever you said that homosexuals is bad, homosexuals are going to hell, I'm here to tell you that's not going to stop them from being a homosexual if they're a homosexual. What they're going to wind up being is a contorted, disfigured, confused person who's afraid to be who they are and wind up being in all kinds of shape, including being on the so-called down low because they have never had any permission or affirmation to safely be who they are in the daylight. So to keep them from acting out and spending their life on eggshells and being neurotic as hell, they have to have room to talk about who they are, and including if indeed they are molested or have been molested. If you create a safety zone for them to talk to you as a parent, they'll tell you about that. If they think you're going to think they're a faggot because they got raped, they're not going to tell you anything. And they're going to wind up acting out.
Uh-oh. We look like we lost Dr. Cleo. But you know what? Fantastic show. If he doesn't come back, I understand. I get it. Fantastic information. He did a wonderful job speaking with us. He's gone. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I just have to say, we have to continue loving each other because love is going to be the only way that we can heal and gain more understanding. It may seem cliche, but it's absolutely very much so true. So let's continue to do that. Continue to love your children. Please, if you want to find out more about the doctor that was on tonight's show, just throw his name in Google, check out his books. and all his work. I think he's popping back in. I'll get him to say his final thoughts. Here he goes. Okay, doctor, got you back. If you remember what you were saying, you can go back into it. But if not, then just give us your final thoughts and tell us about any books you have that you may want us to check out. I know you have a book talking about this trance that Black people are in. That's fabulous. And you can tell us about your centers and everything. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll just close my final comments with that we must create safe space in a hostile environment called the United States for our Black children to show up authentically and talk to their Black parents and guardians about what's going on with them so they won't be traumatized into confusion and anti-Black behavior as adults. So I want to make that clear. My work is with the Amasi Center for Black Culture, Black Wellness and Culture. I also am the interim director of what's called the Pride Center of Maryland in the state of Maryland. And I also am the chief advisor for the Black Men's and Women's Exchange based in Baltimore, Maryland. Black Men's Exchange is an empowerment affirmation group of diverse Black people. The Pride Center is an organization that is unusual in that it's an organization that's for sexual and gender minorities that affirms Black people on a foundational basis as part of how it operates because Baltimore is a predominantly Black city. And the Amasi Center for Black Wellness and Culture is a center that people go to for conversations on affirmation and learning about CTCA, the critical thinking and coach affirmation model that I developed, and come just to be with Black people for the sake of learning to love ourselves in our own image through strategies that are connected to education, affirmation, talking, speaking, etc. My name is Cleo Manago, as the sign says under my name. I can be found on Instagram. I can be found on Facebook. I can be found on Gmail. I can be found on Twitter under my name. And my email is Dr. Cleo Manago at bmxnational.org. Dr. Cleo Manago, that's Dr. Cleo Manago at bmxnational. That's Barry Maxwell X-Ray National.org. Dr. Cleo Manago at bmxnational.org. I'm glad to engage my people. I do it all the time, and I ain't stopping no time soon.
Well, thank you so much for that. My final thoughts is that, just to reiterate, you cannot want your children to be homosexual, same gender loving, but I'm gonna tell you, in college, I met a lot of guys who, I had some gay guy friends, and they would come over to sleep with them, and they would have girlfriends, and I would try to tell them, hey, you need to let your girlfriend know, and they would say, no, I'm not telling her. So we know when these children, when they feel like they have to hide, whether you feel it's right or wrong, some of you that have straight children, they're gonna be sleeping with people who are sleeping with the same gender. So if you feel like you don't like that, all I'm just trying to say is that the more people keep it a secret, the more that I tell women all the time, if you've been out here having sexual relationships, I'm gonna tell you, you've probably slept with a gay man. I mean, that's just, and men, you've slept with a lesbian before. We're not gonna act like women can't be that too. So I just want to throw that out there. And I'm not saying that, I'm saying this just to let you know information, just to say, you can keep trying to hush, but people are still doing it, and you probably already done had that sexual experience yourself. So talk to your children, at least make it a safe place for them to be able to tell you their feelings, and continue to show empathy and God's love. So thank you again, Dr. Cleo. I would love to have you again. We could have talked for so much longer, but I'm sorry that I took you over the time. But hey, you were dropping the jewels and we had to collect them. So thank you so much. I'm going to be in touch. So don't act like you don't know somebody, because I'll talk about you bad, okay? I'll talk about you bad.
Well, thank you, Kera. Thank you, sister, for inviting me. I always appreciate it. I do a lot of conversations and podcasts, etc., and I am honored to engage Black people about transformation, change, and self-love. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. And you guys, I may take a break next week. I'm not sure now, but I'll be back with more Kera Dangerous talk. Please stay on the lookout for Kera Dangerous Outside, because it's coming. It's going to be great. Have some new content coming the top of the year. I got a lot of stuff going on, guys. You don't even, just watch and go to the Kera Dangerous Talk website and buy those t-shirts. They're hot. I got this new MacTown t-shirt coming representing where I'm from, Macon, Georgia, a very historic town. Boom, you're gonna want that. So again, thank you all. Like, comment, share, keep this algorithm on our side, and we'll see you guys next time. See you later, Doc.
See you later.
All right, peace.